Hey, what's up everybody? This is Mewth24, and this is episode 3 of my Gundam Experience series. As you can see before you, I have the Strike Gundam and the Force Impulse, and that means that today's episode is going to cover Gundam SEED, SEED Destiny, and then I'll also do a little bit about SEED Stargazer. Gundam SEED was one of the earliest Gundam series I watched after 8th MS and G Gundam and Endless Waltz, and I got access to it the same way I did with those series, which was through Toonami. Now, this was about the time Toonami was switching over to the Saturday night block, so instead of getting episodes every day, I'd get them once a week, and that was part of the reason that I stopped following it after like episode 15 or so. I just didn't keep interest and kind of forgot because of this new schedule. But one of the things that I really did like right off the bat was the fact that it was militaristic in the sense that it was, connected to the UC origins, but it was also stylized a little bit more. The Cosmic Era is really interesting to me because there's this whole political struggle, but it's not presented in the same way that it is in the Universal Century Timeline stuff. The show was host to some of my favorite mobile suit designs as far as the leads go, and to this day I still think the Duel, Buster, Blitz, Aegis, and Strike Gundam are some of my favorite Gundam designs of all time. One thing that I thought was really interesting about Gundam SEED from the outset was the way they presented the characters. Basically, you had two lead characters. You had Atherin Zala piloting the Aegis and standing for Zaft, and then you had Kira Yamato piloting the Strike and sort of inadvertently brought into the conflict on the Earth side of things. And it was a really interesting formula, I thought, to have two lead characters on opposite sides of this conflict who were formerly best friends and then are pitted against each other, not necessarily out of spite for one another, but it does sort of develop into this dislike for what each other stands for. And it was really this interesting struggle. But the way it headed later on was kind of unfortunate. I'll get to that in a minute. But from the outset, I had a very neutral impact from Kira. I didn't dislike him at the beginning, but I didn't really like him that much either. There wasn't that much coming from him that sold me as a character that I was supposed to like. Atherin, on the other hand, I thought was a great character. I thought he was just really interesting. His inner struggles and, mission to fight against the Earth forces, as well as his pressures from being the son of someone so high up in Zaft, I thought it was just a really cool spin on things. Whereas Kira is sort of this everyman, sort of the younger pilot who is just thrust into things and is basically the Cosmic Era's version of Amuro Ray. So going into my rewatch of Gundam SEED as part of my attempt to view every Gundam series ever made, I had really high hopes for Gundam SEED because those first 15 or so episodes that I watched back in the day were really great, I thought. And while those were still my favorite part of this second watch of the series, things went downhill around episode 20, and they went downhill pretty fast. There were a bunch of cliche monologues, character turns that I didn't really care for. Raul Le Creuset, even though he is sort of a one-dimensional evil maniacal bad guy for the series, I still enjoyed him enough as a villain, but he didn't really sell me as much as the likes of Papimus Shirako, who, in my mind, may not be as evil a bad guy because there's so many other bad guys in the Zeta Gundam series, but he had more depth and complexity to him than someone like Raul Le Creuset. The direction they took with Mulaflaga and some of the Archangel crew as them just sort of like falling off the map for no real reason other than to make it dramatic was frustrating. Characters who I didn't care about giving big dramatic death scenes or scenes where they're just leaving the series. It was really confusing and frustrating to me, is that the characters that you wanted to know some more about just kept running in the same circles, and the characters you didn't care about got some sort of grand flashback or montage of sorts. And then, of course, there's the issue of Kira as a lead character and the fact that he goes ahead and preaches to everyone how they shouldn't be fighting later in the series, and then once he gets the Freedom Gundam, proceeds to blow them all to smithereens in one fell swoop with a blast from every laser cannon he has at his disposal. And there's such a hypocrisy there that it boggled my mind as to how they could have this character be the hero that we're supposed to rally behind, because honestly I hated him. It threw me for such a loop, is that whereas I didn't like Hero in Gundam Wing from the outset, and I never really got to like him until Endless Waltz, here was a character that didn't really offend me by any means. I wasn't rallying behind him immediately, but from the outset I was like, oh, there's room for Kira to develop, and maybe I'll get a chance to like him, and instead I just flat out hated him, and hated the direction they took with him, because he was such a cheeseball, cliche, and very much unlikable character. The end of the series also frustrated me because it just dropped off. It just sort of ended, and they ran into a bunch of just cheeseball, cliche routines at the end of the series, and it was frustrating because it had fallen so far from what it started as. So shortly after finishing SEED, I decided to jump into SEED Destiny, and part of that was because, one, it's a follow-up to the SEED storyline, but also because I had heard a lot of people say, this is probably the worst Gundam series ever invented, and ever realized, and I thought, maybe I should knock this one out of the way early so I don't have to put up with it later on and have this, lingering memory of such a bad series kind of, looming over me. And I was surprised at how much I actually enjoyed SEED Destiny. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not my favorite Gundam series by a long shot, but it improves a lot of what SEED faltered with and where it had its missteps. They introduce a whole new character, Shinasuke, and yeah, sure, he was sort of a dark, brooding, almost emo-type character, but that was what I really liked about the introduction of SEED Destiny, was the fact that, we see the implications of what the first series set in motion, and this whole dark turn in this character who, yeah, maybe he did whine and sort of have this vengeance fueling him throughout the series, but it was at least interesting. He had some reason to fight for what he believed in, whereas with Kira, there was never really that much of a reason given in the first series, and I really just thought it was a cool direction for the series to go, and the fact that they brought Athrun back after he had kind of fallen off the map late in SEED, to be brought back in SEED Destiny as one of the main characters next to Shin, I thought it was just a great direction for it. Unfortunately, it's past that halfway point that things start to fall off the cliff again and just sort of delve into stupid cliche territory in the same way that SEED did. And it's really unfortunate that they had so much going for this series better than SEED right off the bat, and it just treads the same problems that the original series had. It's kind of confusing to me, actually, how this series can, to this day, be one of the more popular ones in Japan, and I don't know if it's because it follows all these conventions that other anime tend to follow, and because it's such a sappy, cliche, and just ridiculous generic turn during the second half. It really confuses me to that end. I do like the soundtrack. The art style's better than it was in SEED, but the mobile suit designs get to be kind of goofball, cheesy as well during the second half. You've got like the Destiny Gundam, which is actually one of the more mild offenders, I suppose. But then you have like the Strike Freedom, where apparently someone decided that the Freedom wasn't gaudy enough and decided to just slap a whole gold inner frame in there because, why not? That's not completely stupid looking and ridiculous. And then the other thing that bugged me was the fact that the Strike comes back for all of like 5 seconds just to get blown up. The suit that made it halfway through the original series gets blown up in a matter of minutes in SEED Destiny. And that's just, I don't know if there were some repairs made to it and they cheapened it, but they never explain that explicitly in the show. And to top it all off, the final moments of SEED Destiny play out exactly the same way they do in SEED. You get really no closure, things just sort of fall off, and it's really upsetting and almost unforgivable that they went and did that same tactic a second time around, especially after you go ahead and try and differentiate the series to the end that SEED Destiny does, where the beginning is so much stronger than SEED was, but the ending is just as bad as SEED's was. So to that end, SEED Destiny does get a little bit of an advantage over SEED to me, but it's just really upsetting that it couldn't go the full distance and instead decided to revert to the same crappy tactics of storytelling, lack of character development, and bringing Kira back into the spotlight as a character that, frankly, I didn't want, and I don't know that many people who actually appreciate it because he's a boring, hypocritical character. Which then brings us to SEED Stargazer, the final of the Cosmic Era series. And this is a series that I actually watched before I finished SEED Destiny, or before I even started SEED Destiny, really. And it's interesting because it's kind of like 8th MS Team or Unicorn, where there's really not that much context that you have to have going into it, but you'll really appreciate it more if you do. And to me, that developed in the sense that this was a series that ran only 3 episodes, and each episode is like 15-20 minutes maybe. And it manages to sell a better story, better character development, better art style, better mobile suit designs, better everything than the previous 2 50-episode series did. Now, when you get right down to it, SEED Stargazer is very much a snippet, very much a quick look at the implications of the early events of Seed Destiny and how they affect people down on Earth as well as some people up in space. But there's never really this black or white morality system painted. It's very much a gray area because these are characters that are doing whatever they need to survive and dabbling in some research or some military tactics that are not exactly the kind of thing you can immediately rally behind. But given the circumstances of this world in peril, this world that's headed toward disaster or in some cases already reached that point, it's just a very interesting and sort of understandable direction for it to go. And while the Phantom Pain Mercenary Group is really cool, SEED Stargazer is one of the first times in a series we get to see an experimental mobile suit, something that is not designed for combat, although it does get drawn into a combat scenario by the end. And this is a really interesting, different direction for the series to go, or for any Gundam series to go for that matter. I'd love to see, personally, more series like this, where it just breaks from all the conventions that have been set forth, not only from the Seed Destiny storyline, but also from the Gundam universe as a whole. It's not so much about the political struggle, but the ramifications of what comes after things have already fallen too far into chaos, and sort of this last-ditch effort to make something out of that. And while there are certainly more OVAs in the Universal Century series than there are out of the Alternate Universe series, SEED Stargazer sort of returns to this constant that I have, where I generally tend to like the OVAs more than the full series or even most of the movies. I think it's because they have this very constrained time frame to work with and a very limited number of episodes, so they just pour their heart and soul into it. And it's a reason that I like 8th MS Team and Unicorn so much more than anything else out of the Universal Century. The same thing applies here with Stargazer, is the reason that I like it so much more than Seed or Seed Destiny for sure, but also even more so than a lot of the Alternate Universe series. So that wraps up episode 3 of my Gundam Experience series. I know it's been a long time since I did episode 2, and I apologize for the huge gap in between there, but I had some technical issues that I ran into and some stuff outside of these videos that I had to take care of, and I just kind of put this on the back burner for quite a while. But I'm hoping to get episode 4 out relatively soon. I'd like to do it within the month, ideally. We'll see if that happens, but hopefully we'll get to that 4th final episode of the Alternate Universe Gundam series experience, and after that, I plan to start the Universal Century series, and with that one I'm going to do it a little bit different than this one, and I'll give you more details on that later on. But that's pretty much it for this video, and with that, I will see you guys next time.